Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 950B, and today's date is April 20th, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. Exerts Pressure on Saudi Arabia as they move away from the U.S. financial system. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I uploaded an interview with Michael Snyder. He is from the Economic Collapse blog. It is now on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, so you can go right over to the channel and view it there, or you can come over to the X22report.com site. You can scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side, you'll see the video there, or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side, you'll see the video there, and you can play it. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we realize that the U.S. government and its various agencies, they are continually spying on American people. Actually, they don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about the rights of the people. Actually, they don't care about the people, period. And we are getting more and more proof of this as time goes on, and it's actually getting worse and worse. And if you remember back, the NSA was caught spying on the people. Of course, they lied in front of Congress saying, no, we are not. And then it came out that, yeah, they are. They're intercepting texts, they're intercepting emails, they're intercepting phone calls. And of course, Obama came out and he said, well, we're going to look into this, we're going to clean this up. And nothing's changed. Actually, it's worse now. And a federal judge, Judge Thomas Hogan, wrote an opinion that the court is extremely concerned about the NSA's behavior, noting that they are violating the law by failing to delete information collected on the internet within the periods mandated. Now, personally, they should not have any of our data because when you look at the Fourth Amendment, you need a warrant to collect this type of information. And right now, it doesn't really matter because the NSA is doing whatever they want. So is the FBI, so is DHS. And we can see as time goes on, they are continually violating more and more of our rights. And I know I mentioned this before, but the Democracy Spring, the peaceful protesters in D.C., well, people were arrested there. And of course, they were arrested for crowding, obstructing, and every other thing they can throw at them. But remember, the First Amendment allows people to peacefully protest. Now, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This is exactly what they were doing. And there is no law that overrides this, but they were arrested. This shows us, when we look at the spying, when we look at what the police are doing today, what the government is doing, they don't care anymore about the rights of the people. Now, if you really expand this and you take it to Common Core, the kids today are going to grow up believing the government has the right to violate your rights. And the brainwashing has already started. And as time goes on, as they keep rewriting the rights, because if you look in the textbooks, they rewrite them to make it seem like they're privileges, and you'll see as the next edition of these books come out, they'll make them as privileges, and before you know it, they'll have the whole population convinced that these are privileges that the government can take away at any time, but they are not. We have rights, we are born with them, and the Founding Fathers put this here on purpose. Believe me, every other country that doesn't have this, they wish they did. And the government right now is continually chipping away and trying to violate each and every one of them as time goes on. The only way we can voice our concerns is if we all stand together and we say, listen, you cannot violate our rights. If you do, you've broken our contract. We the people. And you can no longer be in government at this point. The people have to back all of this up. Without the people backing it up, the government is going to try to do whatever they possibly can to get rid of them. And this is what they're trying to do at this time. Now, out in Ukraine, we see the ceasefire. It is starting to fall apart just like in Syria. Right now, the OSCE, they have recorded about 4,700 times in the last 24 hours that the ceasefire was violated. So things are starting to ramp up. Putin understands this. So he is putting together another meeting of the contact group, and they're going to be meeting in Minsk today to talk about what's going on in Ukraine. And one of the key things that Putin is going to hit upon is why Kiev is not fulfilling the Minsk II ceasefire deal. What steps are they going to take to meet the commitment of the deal? And we'll have to see what Ukraine, the U.S. government, says about this. Most likely, they'll make up some type of an excuse. Now, out in Yemen, we see the battle is still going on. The ceasefire kind of broke down. They're trying to reestablish another ceasefire and some peace talks. But very interestingly, Saudi Arabia was flying their jets over Yemen, and the civilians ran. They thought it was going to be another bombing. And all of a sudden, they see crates fall from the sky with parachutes on them. And what they realized is that Saudi Arabia, they were dropping guns, ammunition to their popular resistance allies inside the country, and the civilians took the crates with all the weaponry. There were 16 wooden boxes. They either had rocket or sniper rifles in them, and they are now selling them and making money off of these weapons at this point. And it looks like a lot of the Houthis are purchasing these weapons from them. And we can see right now that the war in Yemen is not over. We understand that the United States is working with the United Arab Emirates to push another offensive. Of course, they're saying they're going in there to fight Al-Qaeda, but we know the truth. It is to bring more forces into Yemen to put pressure on the Houthis because they need to pay for kicking out the puppet government in Yemen. Now, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, they said a month ago they've proposed a ceasefire deal with Turkey, and Turkey completely said, no way. And they rejected the plan. And they said, listen, we're offering them a ceasefire. We can have peace here. There's no reason for this. And it looks like Turkey keeps looking the other way and saying, you know something, we don't want peace here. We want war. Now, we see the Syrian government and the opposition, they've reached an agreement to let people out of the besieged towns because the opposition, they were complaining about the government not letting humanitarian aid in, not letting people out. And the agreement was made, and it looks like 250 people will leave the two pro-government towns in northwestern Syria in exchange for the same number to be evacuated from the rebel-held town near the Lebanese border. And it looks like they're made this deal, and we're seeing aid come in. We're seeing people being let out of these towns. And we're starting to see that the Syrian government right now, they are continually pushing the Islamic State back. And we see that there's a tug-of-war going on in Aleppo. In Deir ez-Zor, we see the Serb Arab Army, the 104th Airborne Brigade of the Republic Guard, backed by the National Defense Forces. They liberated key districts in Deir ez-Zor, and they are continually doing this. And at this point, we see the U.S. is really backed in a corner right now because the ceasefire deal is falling apart. One of the opposition groups walked out. And we see that there's no peace right now. The people of the country have voted for the government body of Assad. And everything the U.S. has been telling the world that the people want Assad removed, well, all this is turning out to be fake, phony, and false, which we already knew. And it's becoming more and more difficult to prove the reasons why Assad must be removed. And I think at this point in time, they're not really worrying about that at this point. And I think they're going and moving towards the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is to have war with Russia. Now, we've discussed this many times before where the moderate rebels and the terrorist groups, al-Nusra, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, they can morph back and forth. So the Syrian government, the Russian government, and any other government really can't make heads or tails of who's who. And Lavrov is out there, and he's going to ask the UN Security Council to put groups undermining the ceasefire on the terrorist list. He said, "We will soon raise the question in the UN Security Council of including those sabotaging and undermining the truce, but trying to hide under new names on the terrorist list. There is much evidence that al-Nusra is mimicking and trying to disguise itself under new names, uniting with small groups not included in terrorist lists, hence trying to escape retribution." And we see that Russia is on to the tricks of the United States, the tricks of Saudi Arabia, the tricks of the paid mercenary. They realize that these groups just morph into each other to avoid what's going on. And this is part of the ceasefire plan of the United States, because they realize if the moderate rebels are in a certain area, Russia, the Syrian government, will not fire upon that area. So if the Islamic State's there, all they have to do is morph them into the moderate rebels. If al-Nusra or al-Qaeda is there, all they have to do is morph them into them or change them into a different terrorist groups, which is not on the list, like Lavrov is saying. And this is part of the plan to keep certain key areas in Syria. And he went on to say that terrorists who pass themselves off as opposition members and violate the ceasefire in Syria should be destroyed. So we're seeing that they're getting fed up with these games, which we know the United States government central bankers are playing. And of course, the U.S. government is out there saying, we don't know who these terrorists are. But we know this is the proxy army of the United States government central bankers. And the opposition and the U.S. government, they're continually pushing the idea that Assad has to step down. And we have to remember, the agreed-upon Security Council Resolution 2254, calling for the ceasefire and diplomatic conflict resolution, is put into place, and it does not mention anything about Assad stepping down. Actually, there is no regime change. That will be left up to the people. So all of this carrying on about the opposition, how the Syrian government doesn't want to cooperate, this is all propaganda. It's a huge act. They know what the agreement is. And Syria is coming out there. They're getting braver and braver, as I see. They're calling out the opposition, saying they don't even represent the Syrian nation, the people of Syria, because there's evidence, a leaked document that came out, that the Islamic State, and we know the opposition is part of them, they're from 70 different countries. Well, of course they are. They're paid mercenaries. They're not, there's a few from Syria. The rest are coming from Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, all paid for by the United States government central bankers. Now we see Obama, he has arrived in Saudi Arabia to reassure Saudi Arabia that everything is fine. Well, I think what's happening here is that Saudi Arabia is looking to move away from the U.S. financial system. And if we go back in time, we see the U.S. was waving these 28 pages all around saying, yes, it's Saudi Arabia. Well, they already told us it was Saudi Arabia, so we don't have to look into the document because they wanted that out there. And I think in these pages it's going to tell you absolutely nothing. But we see that Congress pushed this law to hold other countries responsible and to do an investigation to find out what really happened. And this is one of the things that the administration doesn't want to come out. The other thing I think is happening is they are blackmailing Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia right now is looking to move away from the U.S. financial system. They realize at this time that the petrodollar is done. And if they stay along this route that they're on right now, it's going to be a complete and utter disaster. And I think they mentioned that they wanted to sell some of their assets, and the U.S. is saying absolutely not. Even if they went ahead and they sold the treasuries, the $750 billion worth of treasuries, it's not going to have that much of an effect on the U.S. government. The Fed, they can create this money and slurp up all those treasuries. They've done it with China. They sold over $700 billion plus worth of treasuries. And they want to sell other assets because they're trying to move away from the financial system, and they don't want to be stuck in it right now. Because think about what's happening here. Russia has stopped the United States, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, the rest of the coalition forces twice now in Syria. And they realize they need to get into Syria because eventually they want to get into Iran. They want to take over. They want the pipeline going up. And this is becoming more and more difficult. And they understand that the system is collapsing. They realize that the dollar is not going to be around for much longer. They're not kept in the dark like the people here in the United States. Many countries realize at this point that the dollar is at its end game. This is why they're making preps where they're saying, okay, we're going to make deals with China. We're going to keep the yuan in reserve. We're going to be using our own currencies for purchasing purchasing oil. And we can see right now that they're continually doing, and they're not using the petrodollar. So it looks like Saudi Arabia is looking to move away from the U.S. financial system. And the U.S. said, no, you're not. We need to keep you where you are, because if you do this, this is going to be a big problem, because many other nations are going to start moving away from the U.S. dollar. And this going forward is going to be a huge, huge problem. Now, everything wrapped around these 28 pages, actually, there are many different agendas associated with this. And as we continually get more and more information, we see that there are a lot of things wrapped up in what is going on here, because we have to realize that up until this point, throughout history, the government has been lying to the people, been lying around the world, and they're continually lying. And you know how that is. When you continually lie, it gets harder and harder to cover the lie. And then you have to lie some more. And we're coming to the point where many of the countries are starting to look at this and say, okay, we understand what's going on here. The system is crashing. It's collapsing at this point. It's not going to last that much longer. And many of these countries are trying to maneuver themselves away from the U.S., trying to separate themselves. Now, this is difficult because we understand that the U.S. is spying on many government officials, and you see how this comes into play, where they can use blackmail to say, no, you're staying where we are. We can see they're using the refugees throughout Europe to bring Europe into the Middle East. They want soldiers. They want military assets. They want to go after Assad. They want a war with Russia. And we're starting to see they're becoming very, very desperate. And this is what should make everyone nervous at this point, because as they become more and more desperate, as the lies continue on, as countries try to pull away, they're going to use more and more events, more false flags, to pull them back in, to convince the people that you need to be united with the United States and you need to go to war. And we can see at this point, they are not going to let up. They'll never admit that they're wrong, and they're going to push this until the very end, because they know at this point they need to start a war somehow, some way. Because if they don't, their entire house of cards comes crashing down, and they will be blamed. And I'm talking about the U.S. government, the central banking system. And this is what they're most afraid of. So they will push this to the edge. They'll even go to nuclear war if they have to, because they don't care at this point. They believe they're going to survive all of it. They believe that they're going to come out of their bunker and they're going to restart the entire system all over again. And this is why the people around the world, cannot let this happen. We need to call them out. We need to band together. We need to tell them it's time for you to step down, not just here in America, all throughout the world. And it's time to get rid of the central banking system, the root of all evil. It is time. And the people need to take back their system. The people need to take back control of everything. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.